Hi, everyone. John Michael Coppola here, and welcome to the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast, where we chat with the actors, directors, choreographers, designers, producers, music directors, lyricists, playwrights, and all the artists who make the Chicago area theaters come alive. We're so excited to have you here with us today. But before we get started, we just want to remind you to please like, subscribe to, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues who you think would appreciate the conversations we're having. We'd be so grateful for your support in this way so we can continue to bring these stories for years to come. Thanks again for being here, and now, curtain up on today's episode. Today's guest is a composer, sound designer, musician, and educator. Select credits as a composer/co-author include Adding Machine at Next Theatre in Evanston, a show for which he's held that position additional times, A Minister's Wife at Writers Theatre in Glencoe and at Lincoln Center, and The Gift of the MAGI at American Players Theatre in Wisconsin. Select incidental music credits in New York and Broadway include When the Rain Stops Falling and 50 Words. And as a composer/sound designer on Broadway, credits include House of Blue Leaves and Brighton Beach Memoirs. In Chicago, he has designed numerous productions for companies including Drury Lane Theatre, Steppenwolf Theatre, the Goodman Theatre, Writers Theatre, Victory Gardens Theatre, Raven Theatre, and Northlight Theatre. He has served in all of these capacities in over 300 productions at venues across the country, including Stratford Shakespeare Festival, Bay Street Theatre, Philadelphia Theatre Company, and Ford's Theatre in Washington, D.C. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Josh Schmidt. Now let's go to the top of the show. Hi, Josh. Thanks for joining me here. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's nice to be here.
Pleasure meeting you. So listen, we start every podcast off the same way, and that is asking our guests to please tell our listeners a little bit about where you grew up, a little bit about your training, and please finish up with what your first theater experience was. So I hand it off to you.
All right. My name is Josh Schmidt. I'm a composer, sound designer, sometimes performing musician, sometimes playwright, orchestrator, all of that fun stuff for the theater, dance, and now film. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I work in Chicago all the time. Um, and my first theatrical experience was seeing a production of Candide in a mechanics, a converted mechanics garage shop into a theater called the Skylight Opera Theater. This was way back in 1991, I believe.
Okay.
And that was the first theatrical experience that I can remember that was like, oh, well, this is pretty cool. So,
Was that in Milwaukee?
yes.
Yeah. Skylight, are they still around? They're still around, aren't they?
Well, that particular building is no longer around. It was very interesting because the Skylight Opera Theater was sort of the linchpin of this new urbanism movement, and
I see.
there's a very, very bougie, very nice part of the city now called the Third Ward, which is where
Okay.
all of the fruit stands used to be, and a lot of stuff that came off boats like produce and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was all run down, and they moved the Skylight Theater there to a brand new theater in 1990 or
Okay.
thereabouts, and that's where it is now. It's still around. It's been undergone many revisions.
Got it.
That's why I got my start.
I guess that's why I got confused. I know the name Skylight Theater, but when you said it was a converted, whatever you said it was.
For 35 years prior, they were on the other side of 794 on
Okay.
Cathedral Square in a obstructed view, very tiny, converted mechanics garage with a greenhouse on top.
Gotcha.
Like
Okay.
storefront theater in Chicago. So it's no mystery why I started loving working in the storefront scene in Chicago when I finally got there.
Understood. It's where you came from. It's part of your roots. Yeah. So you came to Chicago via how? From Milwaukee?
I got my start actually at Writers Theatre
Mhm.
when it was still in the bookstore on Books and Vernon in 2001, and my first show was A Phoenix Too Frequent with Sean Fortunato.
Uh-huh.
Karen Woodich and Maggie Carney. And that was in 2001. It was a very strange show to do right around 9/11.
Oh.
You know, this idea of being reborn from the ashes as it was happening.
Oy.
I mean, that play in and of itself is the product of this movement in England to sort of to rebirth, for lack of a better term, the English art scene after the Germans had pretty much just destroyed everything to smithereens.
Ah.
So it had a particular resonance to it. And then from there, I met many, many important people in the scene as far as working, people like Bill Brown and Kate Buckley and David Cromer, who is my second show in Chicago, was The Price at that very same theater.
Okay.
And then I started to work sort of everywhere. And I worked with David quite a bit. And I worked at Writers Theater. Uh, I haven't gone back since the pandemic because just scheduling, and I've had other projects, including this big film that
Sure.
I did. But that was very much an artistic home for many, many years in Chicago. And then that led to a lot of work at Steppenwolf, which is probably the other big one.
Mhm.
But I've worked all over. It's a very different scene now than it was back then. That's for sure.
Understood. Where did you get your training for sound design?
Well, my actual degree, this is very strange because Dre and I sort of joke about this, that both of us have history degrees.
You and who
Uh,
else?
Andre Plus,
Oh, okay.
we both have degrees in regular, straight ahead old history.
Okay.
And I also have a degree in music composition and technology. Both of these are from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
Okay.
I never took a theater class in my life. A lot of my involvement in the theater came from back in the day. I could program synthesizers and samplers. This is in the days before main stage.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I got a lot of work at the theater, musical theater places, and even the symphony. And that sort of led to, well, you're writing these electronic music pieces for 30 people who come to see your university show. 10 of them at least are being forced to go there to write some sort of report for a class.
Mhm.
Why not apply your skills to a place where people are coming for an entirely different reason?
Right.
And that kind of led me into the theater, and that kind of led me into sound design. And in terms of sound design, I am extremely self-trained. Now, I did have a grant that no longer exists from, I don't even know if the National Endowment for the Arts, are they still around?
I
But
think just barely at this
yeah,
point.
like they hold an office somewhere. Um, but it was the National Endowment for the Arts
Mhm.
Theater Communications Group Career Development Program, the NEA TCG CDP. Now that no longer exists either, but I got that grant based upon my work in Chicago and in the regions, which it took me. I graduated college in 1999, and the next 5 years were me sort of like expanding upon all of these connections that I had made working professionally while still being in school,
Uh-huh.
and um and letting that fan out where they were sort of in concentric circles, originally centered in Milwaukee, but then that brought me to Madison, and that brought me to American Players Theater, where I met a ton more Chicago people,
Mhm.
and that brought me into Chicago, where I started to work a lot. And then a lot of those people started to get regional work. So it was a very much like a gradual, I would say, concentric circles of where one works. And
Got it.
every time you, while you still retain your foothold in storefront, do it yourself, which teaches you a lot,
Uh-huh.
because when you are working in my line of work in big union houses, which is great and financially more uh, rewarding,
Mhm.
but you have to understand what you're doing because you can't touch anything. Whereas in the storefront, they're like, well, if you want that done, you better do that your damn self. And
Right.
that's and um I still do that. Um, but the I through that grant, my 2 of my mentors on that I worked for 2 months, because I never truly really assisted anybody except for being on that grant. Like, I never really
Huh.
was an assistant designer. I assisted one guy in New York, um, briefly, for one show, Rob Kaplowitz, great guy. But, I worked with Michael Bodine and Rob Milburn for 2 months, at a show at Steppenwolf and at a show at Goodman back in, when would that be? 2003, 2004. And they taught me a whole hell of a lot. And then on that same grant, then for 2 more months, I did a show with this troupe out of, New York City. They're really sort of everywhere, and I don't even know how active or what they're doing these days, but it was called the Builders Association,
Okay.
which was an offshoot of the Wooster Group, except the Builders Association was very much, there's all of this amazing new technology, and we're gonna let the technology lead us to the actual play. So we would start
Huh.
tech without we would start tech on the first day of rehearsal, sometimes without a fully written script.
Interesting.
And we did a project at the old, which no longer, Studebaker factory, which was I think it was a health hazard, called Avanti in South Bend, Indiana. And then I worked on a project with them that started at St. Anne's Warehouse called Supervision. And that this model of these enormous, very, art-driven, technology-driven shows that then would travel the circuit, like Brooklyn Academy of Music, Wexler Center of the Art, all of these big, Walker Center in Minneapolis. I don't know how many places still do that to that effect. I think the build like at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, they had a space. It would be something like that, you would take up residency for a couple shows,
I see.
and that's what the Builders Association used to do. And a lot of the technology and software really got seriously road tested, particularly in projections.
Ah.
So, like, I feel like I sort of witnessed part of the growth of what has now become a very commonplace, um, part of theatrical production in projections. Um, and the one particular piece, Supervision, had like a row of like 4 people sitting in front of the stage with a huge, powerful for that time computer, trying to make that work. And teching for 8 weeks is an interesting experience, let me tell you. But
I bet.
teching without a script is an interesting experience, let me tell you. But the sound designer there, Dan Dobson, I still think he's one of the greats, unheralded greats within the industry, because nobody was working in an environment like that.
Ah.
That environment in this, I mean, that is entirely foreign to um, regional theater production, even New York production
Yeah.
it has, I don't even know how commonplace it is in, in Europe these days anymore. It's a skill, because and it's also a blessing to have at least have gone through that. I don't know how effective I was, because I was still really I mean, literally New York, Chicago sort of threw me into a fire more than I understood what was going on. And then when I kinda had my bearings on that, then to get thrown into that particular project and then thrown into New York, you know, non-for-profit and commercial theater, I was always sort of treading water and, standing on uncomfortable ground with rising water.
Yeah.
And and I and the film, uh, most certainly too. But I think that's part of the experience. It's that
Yeah.
if you really it's doesn't necessarily, it's certainly, trust me, certainly not financially remunerative, but over time you actually understand how to work yourself through problems,
Mhm.
and you become very facile, or at least knowledgeable, in many, many different areas of production, because you have to.
Yeah.
and and you always feel challenged.
Mm,
And if I can get bored really easily if I'm not feeling particularly challenged.
yeah.
It's nice sometimes to get that simple show, although I've come to the realization that there's very little in the way of simple shows out there to do, you know?
Yeah,
If you feel and that's what you want, you're probably just tired. Probably should take a little vacation. Never
probably.
possible, but
Yeah. So it's sometimes trial by fire, and you got to fake it till you make it is the best way to grow and learn new skills and become as well rounded as you become. So it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. Lots of people have attributed their successes to that type of influence. So
well,
uh,
I think pretty much everybody is in that spot one way or another, you know?
agreed.
If you're I just think of the lighting designer at that worked with Builders Association, Jennifer Tipton, who taught for years and years and years at Yale at Yale, what's on my mind. And, you know, her one of the first great, if not like the first class of great lighting designers, innovators in the medium. So everything you do is an innovation.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
So there where you're dealing with very little precedent. I'll tell you that, I've done 2 shows in 2025 at Drury Lane, Oak Brook Terrace, Dial M for Murder and The Da Vinci Code, and Drury Lane, um, produces a lot of musicals,
Hmm.
and the type of both shows, more so The Da Vinci Code, which was directed by Elizabeth Margolius,
Good
um
friend mine. Yes.
um, were really heavily soundscaped, meaning that they had a lot of cues. And because the person, Tom Cole, Via Lap, and Kyle Gates, they have that audio team where whoever's running sound that day, they're not in a booth,
Right.
so they can't you can't if you have like a zillion and a half sound cues, which both of those shows at certain points did, they both numbered well into the 800s. And you're mixing microphones because
Right.
of the just that has become a production standard for a lot of theaters these days.
Yeah.
You can't sit there and call all of those cues because you can't have a headset and respond. And otherwise, if you were taking things off cue lights, you might as well just put a strobe light there, you
Right.
know?
Right. Right.
So, as a result, what they have to do is they actually have to take their own cues and only take things where things have to line up together. I can tell you that the Builders Association, which had a gazillion video, a gazillion lighting cues,
Yeah.
and a ton of sound cues, didn't have a stage manager in that
Oh.
sense. They never took their every single department took their own go.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the person who designed the show was running the show doing it.
Sure.
And what happens is that when you're doing that, because every night is different, you're engaged in what the actor is doing, and there's something about that that really makes it seem like we're all in it together.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Now, it's funny you're mentioning Dial M for Murder because that was one of the next questions I had for you. I'm going to skip the second half of the question that I had, though. So, in a play like Dial M for Murder, which I saw at Drury Lane and was, the soundscape really adds so much to the show. You kind of it's there, and then the moments that, or rather, I should say, you don't notice that it's there, but you recognize that it's adding to the production. And then there'll be a moment where something suspenseful will happen on stage, and we get that type of dun dun, that sort of exclamation musically. How is that built into the show? Now you're saying maybe the sound guy is taking his own go, so I get that, and he's likely following the script. But is the music that's underscored there on a loop, or is it like just a? I'm curious to know what the logistics are to make a moment like that happen.
Well, the Dial M for Murder is not strictly in the whodunit category because we
Hmm.
know who did it.
Sure.
And the question, via lap, I'll reference her again because she says something really interesting. I said, "Well, what do you think this is about?" And she's like, "Here is another slimeball dude, and it looks like he's going to get away with murder." Okay. So there are certain structural things in that adaptation by Jeffrey Hatcher that ins- that are important that the audience register that something is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That you can't and the director, Adam Imovar, and I really sort of he knew the play really, really well and had directed it not much earlier than when we did it at another theater, at his theater in Seattle. And he knew really well where those linchpin where the tension ratchets up. And they can when you don't have it there, then it's behooving upon the actors sometimes to really make the audience believe that something has happened,
Yeah.
which can lead to some really extraordinarily strong, if not overdone choices,
Mm-hmm.
because the actor has the full responsibility of making that happen.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that actors can do a lot, and you don't have to do a lot to to help them.
Mm-hmm.
But so, for the most part, the types of things that we did, we tried to be as subtle as possible.
Right.
And there were thematic elements. Most of it was like, um, it wasn't Bernard Herrmann who was Hitchcock's, although Herrmann did not write the score to Dial M for Murder, um, but one of Hitchcock's great collaborators. And there were certain stylistic choices within the orchestra, or shall we say orchestrational groups, like cello and bass pizzicato, like creeping along, or like a stinger with trumpets on with mutes inside of them,
Mm-hmm.
coupled with vibraphones, and all of them fit as sort of extensions out of the massive orchestral cues that I created for the big transitions, which there are very few,
Mm-hmm.
but all of the music felt like it was deconstructed from the same piece or was going to add up to something when we got there.
Yeah.
And they all had thematic relevance to the character. This is Tony Wendis working. This is Tony Wendis thinking. This is somebody screwing up, whatnot. This is a really dangerous thing. They were, and then there was a rehearsal. I didn't really know how they were working until because at Drury Lane we basically have like a 2-week rehearsal process in the room,
Uh-huh.
which if you know the play and the talented actors that they have there, um, that it's not a lot of rehearsal time, but it's possible. And then there was one rehearsal where I had written a bunch of these. They were tiny little fragments. They were fragments that could be looped. There were different transpositions. They were, as we would say, if we were producing games or even like in hip hop stuff, they were one shots where they were a small single gesture that could be repeated. And we found places for them that really helped the actor not have to over muscle a moment to tell
Uh-huh.
that story,
Uh-huh.
and we incorporated them in rehearsal and before we did a designer run, and then we ran it in a designer run, and then we were like, oh, this could use more here, we can get rid of this one. And that process of just sort of intuitively messing around with these kinds of little bits of material
Yeah.
that then were able to inform or be informed by these massive transition cues that had to be made was the process of putting that score together. Where we did Da Vinci Code, which was almost entirely scored through, that the music never stopped. That was a much more complicated process. And I had to be in rehearsal every single day to build this massive soundscape that drove that play along and helped again put a bed of underneath the actors so that they understood what was important in shifting, because the Da Vinci Code was done on a much more abstract scale.
Uh-huh.
I also think, just speaking of going back to Dial M for Murder, that the sequence where Lesgate comes in to murder Tony Wendis's wife,
Mhm.
is extraordinarily difficult because you have rain and weather.
Mhm.
You have a radio interview that has to peek through at certain spots at the very right time, which I had a fabulous associate on that show, Ian C. Weber, um, who was in rehearsal a lot of time in order to sculpt all of that, at least start that process together because Adam had very, very specific ideas on what to do.
Yeah.
And you had the music score to go along with it. So
Right.
you had sort of three different brains, three different systems of how sound operates happening together, which is a lot to coordinate. But we managed, you know.
Yeah.
And it's also good to learn how to work on that on a limited time schedule where it's not you don't have a ton of time to do everything. We had just the right amount and we were organized. And again, the I have the working at Drury Lane, I have the wonderful sound team there
Mhm.
that we all everybody does really, really great work in my experience. And you can have those kinds of beautiful, really organic processes happen even on a what would be in comparison to other places a truncated schedule.
So fascinating. You gave us a glimpse into how putting it together in the rehearsal process for those 2 shows worked, but take us to the beginning of when you're doing a new piece. Obviously, you read the script and you meet with the director, but where does the inspiration of the style of the music that would be appropriate for the piece come from? What kind of research do you do to get your musical brain into the world of that play? And when do you know that you've cracked the code, if you will, as to what's appropriate for it?
Uh, oh man. I don't really know if you ever really know.
That's
Um,
fair.
look, I'm trained as a composer,
Yeah.
and the history aspect of it means that part of just who I am as a person is I crave information. And I
Okay.
crave not just if I hear something, if there's a piece of music that I really like, chances are there's 10 other pieces of music that fed the stream or was at least dipping its toe in the same water
Mhm.
from all over the place. And um then I want to listen to those, and each one of those pieces has 10 pieces of music. And over
Mhm.
time, you are building a vast sort of network of logic of how a lot of different pieces of music that you love or elements of what makes a particular genre or style, both words which I detest, um, work, and how you can effectually either mimic them or um, innovate upon them or subvert them, which is my favorite thing to do. Um, but it's not just a discussion with the director, it's every aspect of design. And sometimes certain aspects of design are more prevalent than others. I'll just give the example again of a place where a lot of great Chicago actors go to work in the summertime, which is American Players Theater.
Mhm.
Um, they've gotten much more elaborate in their scenic designs that they put upon a stage outdoors with no amplifiers, but costumes has always been a really, really big part of what they do.
Yeah.
And a costume design can indicate a lot of things about where you should be looking at musically,
Mhm.
if and if you don't see any pumpkin pants there, don't be putting no Renaissance music behind anything. Or if you're gonna do that, then what does that mean? I just got into a really, really deep conversation. It's an ongoing conversation, with the director of the film that I did, The End. The End starred Michael Shannon, who
Mhm.
we all know, and, Tilda Swinton,
Oh, great.
and it
Great
was
cast.
released it was a musical, and it was, released in December of 2024, and it's still in, limited release. In fact, I think it opens in a month in Japan.
Okay.
That's how movies work these days. Um, and the director, Joshua Oppenheimer, and I, um, really found ourselves, because we had a very truncated post-production period, of finding the right language to that if we're looking at something and I think what I'm looking at is yellow and what he thinks he's looking at is orange,
Mhm.
or not just that, but if you had 10 different pieces of music and you put it up against the same image, they all could work. It's about what do you want to say with
Ah,
what you're putting against the other thing. It's the
I see.
idea of the quote unquote third thing, that A plus B equals C, and C is different than the sum of its parts or the individual building blocks of its parts. Really strong ideas of this is, I mean, nobody thought that that Johann Strauss's waltz were anything but, uh, either people in wild ballroom costumes
Mhm.
or very rotund Bavarians, uh, you know, Prost. And
Right.
then Stanley Kubrick, while cutting 2001, is using the beautiful Blue Danube. And he's got a score by Alex North, and he pays the guy, but he discards it, doesn't use any of it
Huh.
because he loved the Blue Danube. Now, that completely changed our association both with space travel,
Yeah.
but also with what it meant to look at that waltz. Because those two things, science fiction and, you know, the Viennese waltz, were never married before like that.
Right. Right.
And the same thing can happen in theater. And sometimes you're doing stuff like that where the sound is front and center, and sometimes you're doing stuff where the sound is way, way, way in the background, just sort of driving things along, and you don't really want to notice any of it, but you
Uh-huh.
need it.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes you have to be, this is the big one, is you have to say we don't need anything.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes your job is, it's not about writing cues at all. It's about constructing a system that allows the actors on stage to be heard, or practical sounds to function.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a sound design in and of itself catches at least three, I would say way more than that, different disciplines under the same discipline umbrella, if
Yeah.
that makes any sense. And everybody's different, and there's no way in hell I'm good at all of it. And you want to um, find your people, and not only just find them, but empower them, and to augment collectively a really, really thoughtful and and you know, um, detailed and emotional process as possible where everybody's invested behind what you do. And there is no one way that that happens. There's no, you can, sure, you can talk to the director and he might be like, he, she, they might be like, ah, it's great. And then
Yeah.
you get in the rehearsal and it's like, well, none of that meant anything. So,
Sure.
I mean, so you have to be, I guess what that means is there is value in doing a lot of research and building something, and then you get to rehearsal and you try it and you realize this was a totally bad idea. Well, that eliminates that choice from your potential avenues to go. So how fast can you pivot? And it's
Yeah.
play, it is a play, meaning the more prepared you are, the more different things you have at your fingertips available, whether you're making it or you're finding it or you're, however that works. And with every single person, it's different. You want to get in, you want to be prepared enough that you can have the time to explore the unknown. And maybe there are those beautiful moments where y- everybody does something that you never expected that you were going to do when you started it. Otherwise, it's just a factory, you know?
Hmm.
And sometimes that's okay. Hell, I mean, when you're doing as much work as me and some of my friends are, it's going to happen. But
Yeah.
I I always try in my preparation to plot way more things into the play than possible.
Uh-huh.
And for every single one of those things in the plot, there's maybe 5 to 10 contrasting examples.
Uh-huh.
And I build this huge toolbox of stuff. This is just involving playback, okay?
Yeah.
This is not about like setting music or writing a musical or working on film and whatnot. But
Yeah.
um and you come ready with an arsenal of things that you can deploy,
Mhm.
and you can all find that stuff together in the room. It's really great when a director's there, but the actors have a chance to sort of ingest it too, and they're not just thrown a whole mess of technical elements on the first day of tech.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
because actors actually are the reason that people are coming to see this stuff. They don't really give a crap about, "Oh, look, playback," but um, it changes their behavior too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's it and some of those things translate to every single facet of it.
Yeah. I
I hope that
appreciate
was
you.
a very long-winded answer, but
No, I appreciate your insight into all of that, and just to dispute your last phrase, when I saw Dial M for Murder, the soundscape really does add so much more to the show, and it was seeing that show. I had been wanting a sound designer on the podcast for a long time, and I was like, "This is the guy I want to talk to," because there were so many things that you've touched on between the soundscape and like the rain and the interview, all that happening at once, and the suspenseful moments underscoring that I knew that you were the guy I wanted to chat with. So I
well
enjoyed the show for more than just the acting. Just
sure,
for
but I mean, if we're gonna take Dial M for Murder as an example, okay?
yeah,
I mean, it was a very famous play, but it was also a very famous film
right.
directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and while he did not use Bernard Herrmann for that film,
Mhm.
the 2 of them together are very much an item.
Yeah.
The '50s were them, and Bernard Herrmann is a very specific composer
Mhm.
who has very, very specific stylistic things that he does when
Yeah.
he's writing, and we are setting the play in the time that it was written,
Right.
okay? So, it came with it a huge amount of associations that even though we took a journey and listening to a bunch of different things,
Yeah.
okay, we actually circled back to arrive at that to some degree. I think the attempted murder scene is a example where we got a little bit creative, particularly with the underscore, which really got strange and maybe the most affected of anything, that it wasn't straight ahead orchestral stuff, but it
Right.
wasn't overpowering what was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And
Not at all.
the design itself was there to both shock you into place and to put you in that time period and help to immerse you in that world
Uh huh.
so that you could pay attention on what was going on to the play.
Yep.
And then also track the things that were important to the revealing of the psychology of a guy who is so pissed at the world
Mhm.
and so angry at the lack of the success that he feels he's entitled to, that he launches into this extraordinarily complex plot to rid himself of his wife and
Mhm.
collect upon her wealth.
Mhm.
I mean, so my job is to support that.
Right.
In a play that I did right at the same time, that tech the week following, Mr. Wolf had a completely different set of circumstances that
Mhm.
I and actually a director who really knew what they wanted, K. Todd Freeman, fabulous director, um, and, one of the great actors that on any stage, but he knew exactly what he wanted. He didn't know how all the dots necessarily connected,
Yeah.
but he had a really, really strong idea of how that was supposed to work. And in some ways, I would freedom is I don't need freedom. I need clarity. Okay. Like
Uh-huh.
clarity is a lot better than freedom.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Sometimes you need the freedom to figure out what's the clearest route that the two people can agree upon. But when two directors back to back who had a real clear sense of what they wanted,
Yeah.
and then you have X amount, if depending on how big or small the area of which you need to find what you're going to do is, then that determines how much work it's going to be. And the two plays couldn't be more different in the content
Yeah.
that they had. And and it was a fascinating ride to do those two plays, sort of back to back to each other. So there is not a single process that rhymes out the same. There's not a single process with the same director that rides out the same way every time.
Sure, that makes a whole lot of sense. So listen, I'm going to pivot our conversation a bit. This one is a pure curiosity of mine. So I want to chat about the evolution of mic placements as I've seen it over the last 20 years. Now, for many years they were always up here. We've seen them now come down like over the ear or down, even more extreme, closer to the mouth. And as a director, and as an audience member, both are true. Having it so close to the mouth distracts me visually and pulls me out of the piece because we see the thing no matter how much you try and disguise it. But also, if you're doing a musical and the character is now singing in a handheld mic, quote unquote, well, we know it's not live more often than not. I mean, if the fidelity sounds different, maybe they've switched to the handheld. But as a director, I once did a piece where I had staged some fight business, which included a facial slap. And then they had a microphone on their face. And then I had it during tech and I had to change it. So I'm just curious. I know it's not every show, but is there a reason why we've changed the placement? Does it sound better? Is it just a director choice? Is it a sound designer choice? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
It sometimes is even a choice that is institutional.
Meaning?
Meaning, I used to work quite a bit at Lincoln Center,
Mhm.
and Andre Bishop was now it's Lear de Bessonet, but Andre Bishop was the artistic director there for years.
Mhm.
And Andre Bishop detested mics. He understood that they were necessary to be there.
Mhm.
And so his basic blanket artistic director statement was, yes, we're miking people. I don't want to know they're mic'd.
Mhm.
I don't want to see. I want to have it as invisible as possible.
Mhm.
And then I did shows to a couple different places down in the Broadway box, like Second Stage and whatnot. And they're like, well, I really don't care where. I want whatever placement is going to give me the most clear microphone that I can get it as loud as possible, as if there was a studio mic strapped in front of their face.
Mhm.
And because I really want every single word to be out there and clear
Yeah.
and fit, and so don't try and hide the microphone.
Mhm.
And that these are things that are the institutional aesthetic that goes into play. So
Yeah.
that's one part of it.
Okay.
And the thing that they're chasing is both. There's two elements of what they're chasing. They're chasing how present is the element itself
Mhm.
visually, and what is the quality of sound that we get.
Mhm.
Um, the closer you get any microphone to somebody's mouth, the more it's going to sound like a movie
Mhm.
or uh, a cast album recording or whatever you're referencing.
Right.
So the closer you get it there, the better.
Mhm.
Well, if you don't want to have it as visible as that means if you don't want it right down near the mouth,
Yeah.
but you need to have it as invisible as possible with as close as possible. That's where you see hair placements.
Mhm.
And, I don't have, there's more than one recession going on, but the for people who have, or if you're wigged, nice hair, this is not a bad place.
Yeah.
Okay. This will give you a very different sound because of where it is in relationship to your mouth
Sure.
than over the ear. But there are people that don't have hair
Yeah.
that they need to be over the ear, or they're wearing lots of hats, or they're having lots of costume changes. That
Uh-huh.
there are technical things that whatever your ideal would be, um, they would, that goes into the decision. I mean,
Yeah.
we've put microphones on people's glasses
Mhm.
if they weren't ever taking their glasses off during the show. As soon as they say, "Oh, we're gonna take our glasses off during the show,"
All bets
then
are off.
yeah, then you run into situations where you wish you had mics on everybody,
Mhm.
because having mics on not everybody, means that there's a difference.
Mhm.
And I remember doing a particular scene on a production where, um, there was no way in hell that we had any. It wasn't in the budget or in the pre-approved budget, and this is many, many years ago now. But we had one mic, and we had it planted in the brassiere of somebody who was who was whose costume really made their, um their figure sort of amplified,
Mhm.
and people were actually that's where the microphone sat. Um, I mean, how many different stories can I tell you?
Yeah.
The production that we did at Steppenwolf of Bug, which is
Mhm.
now transferring,
Yeah.
um, doesn't use any mics at all, because for 35% of the play, 2 of the protagonists are naked. So then you're using area mics, but area mics pick up the room as
Yeah.
much as they do everything else. So you have to make whatever the situation is, the the ugliest, potentially the thing that pulls you out is if you are trying to make like a rock show,
Mhm.
or you have a really big orchestra and you want the cleanest access to it, this might be the only place that you're going to get
I see.
that sound.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you weigh, well, what's more important? Slap the other cheek, punch them in the stomach, or have a mic placement that's going to make it really difficult for the person mixing to actually make them sound good, because
Yeah.
you might lose your slap moment, but you will definitely get mad as the director if I can't hear them or they sound like crap.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're sort of it. There are all sorts of nuances to that discussion. In
Right.
the end, Mike, particularly what has been amazing, and I would say it's gone warp speed since, uh, even before the pandemic. Okay.
Mhm.
And particularly in commercial theater, where we're grabbing people who have 0 experience on stage,
Mhm.
or 0 experiencing having to know how to use their voice
I
and
was
to
just gonna
project
ask
in
that
a space.
how that played into it. Yep.
But, um, even still, like, if you have 10 people in a play and 4 people are used to the film, TV, very intimate, which there is value to,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
style of acting, and you have 6 people who don't need microphones at all,
Yeah.
you will have a show that, because amplifying just takes whatever you put in there
Right.
and sends it out into the world louder.
Right.
It will still sound like 2 groups of people in 2 completely different plays,
Right. Sure.
because how hard you push your voice creates a particular sound in your voice.
Yeah.
It's something that eventually, over time, as you sit and watch the play, you kinda get used to, you hope, because that's just how they sound.
Yeah.
But, um, for a lot of actors that I work with that are of a certain age era, which are most of them, that didn't get mic'd in place, putting microphones on them sort of robs them, to a degree, of their own agency and how they sound.
Interesting. Yeah.
But it also, like, audiences, especially in huge houses, wanna hear the things too, and as somebody who also deals with, certain frequency loss issues in hearing, I wanna hear things as well.
Yeah.
And so, there are there's no easy answer. It's a per case basis.
Yeah.
But it is a direction where everything is going towards, where everything, in particularly in large houses, is mic'd,
Yeah.
or even relative. I mean, Drury Lane, I think is a fairly sizable house, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm how much what can we do when we put mics on actors that still gives them the agency to have control over the sound of their voice? They just have to take into account the the fact that they're being amplified.
I appreciate your perspective on that because it's just something that I never really understood from just the visual perspective. I mean, I'm not a obviously not a sound engineer or a sound designer, so as an audience member, I never had a problem hearing sound when it was up in the hairline, and I've, particularly when it's a period show, like some of these jukebox musicals, like Beautiful, let's just say, like they're in the 50s and the 60s, and we know that back then there was no such thing as a quote unquote Madonna mic or a microphone to the face. So that a show like that, when it's a period piece, that's when I really get the most pulled out of the experience.
Yeah, I often just sometimes just have to ask the questions like, what is our priority here? Is our priority here, I don't want to see the damn microphone?
Hmm.
Or is it my priority here? I want to hear the closer you put your ear to somebody's mouth when they're talking,
Yeah,
the
of course.
more frequencies, the deeper they'll sound. I mean, the whole idea of proximity effect where you're singing into a microphone and you're talking like this and you know, like
Yeah,
I mean, it's a different sounds. It is an
yeah,
aesthetic choice. Back in the day, the Ethel Mermans of the world, when they were doing cast recordings, would sing to 2 mics that were 10 feet plus away from them.
yeah,
Bing Crosby sort of changed, and Patty Page and Les Paul sort of changed the game by recording people's with their mouths right up to a microphone.
I
And
see.
audiences have become accustomed to a certain sound.
Yeah,
So there is actually an aesthetic decision that needs to happen that I don't like to make. I just like to effectuate, which is how do you want it to sound? Where
yeah,
do your values as an institution, as a director, are you in sync? And then there you go. And it makes more sense in musicals, okay?
hmm,
And but it's now becoming a prevalent thing in plays too.
yeah,
And having come of age as a designer in an era where you were trained to have big sound design shows that the soundscape fit underneath the acoustic image of the voice, no amplification whatsoever.
right.
It's sort of like, wow, it's a welcome to a new world.
It sure is. We're just about coming up on the end of the episode, but I wanted to know if there's anything you wanted to mention before we wrap up, but also what's coming up next for you. You're a busy guy, lots of projects in the air.
Yeah, I have one project that recently opened, this production of Murder Girl at Milwaukee Chamber Theater, which runs through December 14th. Opening this Friday, with some Chicago talent involved, is Boswell, also at Next Act Theater, run by Cody Estel, who for many years ran the Raven in Chicago. That opens this Friday and runs also through November 14th. Then I'm on my merry way to New York to tech and open Bug at Manhattan Theater Club, directed by David Cromer,
Great.
starring Carrie Coon and Namir Smallwood and Randall Arney and
Hmm.
Jen Angstrom. The whole crew is all back together, and just what will warm the cockles of the holiday heart. A little bit of nudity, a little bit of darkness, a little bit of crack smoking. I mean, it will ignite the passions of many. Um, I'm really excited about it. I mentioned it before. You can stream The End, starring Michael Shannon, Tilda Swinton, uh, Moses Ingram, George McKay, an amazing cast, once in a lifetime experience for me. I hope maybe I get another crack at it, but the film is for another interview. Um, that's streaming on Hulu/Disney and is available on Apple Store. And then I am under commission from the Met Opera, and I am mad dash working that, trying to finish that.
Are you composing an opera?
Yes, with this was announced many years ago, so I can, but it again, some things take the time they take.
Yeah.
I writing that with Mr. Dick Scanlon, who is also known to have written the book for Thoroughly Modern Millie.
Yes.
He did a lot of work writing the book with Berry Gordy on Motown.
Yes.
He's a fantastic director in his own right. Writer, director, Whirl Inside a Loop is one that comes to mind. I'm blessed that I work with all of these amazing people. And then I'm going to be the L. Harris Keenan Fellow at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts for the winter semester. So I'll be spending a lot of time there, and I'm very excited about that. Hopefully, save a little money before the robots take over. So
that's such exciting stuff. I look forward to seeing your name over and over again, particularly back here in Chicago.
I am coming back in a way. I will be doing the last ever production of a play for Northlight Theatre at its old digs. I'm co-designing this with Dee Williams. Linda Fortunato is directing. This is a play called The Angel Next Door, written by Paul Slade Smith, former Chicagoan. We've done it once before up at Peninsula Players. It's a really, really fun, classic romp farce with a more to it than all of those things together. So that I think that's kind of interesting, and it just goes to show you that the landscape of Chicago is ever changing. There's always new things growing. There's all these new people. It's a privilege for me to work there in different places and keep coming back. And felt really honored to be part of your little podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We're honored to have you, and we're excited to have you continually working in Chicago. And you're welcome back anytime you want to wax poetic about the life of a sound
Do I
engineer.
wax poetic, or do I?
Everyone wax poetic.
Do I chafe poetic? I don't know.
You can call it however you'd like. It's totally fine. We're honored to have you here. Hope to have you back soon. Thanks for joining us at the Chicago Theater Makers Podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. The Chicago Theater Makers Podcast is a production of Spirit Art LLC, and our podcast theme music is by Paul Langford. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please drop us a note at our website, ChiTheaterMakersPodcast.com. That's ChiTheater, makers with an S, podcast.com. We hope you enjoyed spending time with us as much as we enjoyed spending it with you, and we'll see you on the board soon.